Welcome to the Texas Conflict Coach radio program. If you've ever experienced or engaged in destructive or unresolved conflict, then you know it leads to broken relationships, distrust, and damaging results. Our program will help you manage and resolve conflict effectively with strategies, valuable resources, and support. Since 2009, our radio program hosted guest experts from around the globe sharing their perspectives, experiences, and expertise while giving you food for thought. If you can't listen live, then download and listen to any of our 300-plus podcasts in our library at texasconflictcoach.com. So sit back, relax, or join the conversation every Tuesday evening, or tweet us at TXConflictCoach.
We kick off our series this month on workplace bullying and harassment with the many faces of bullying. Now, this term bullying is used often, so we'll talk about what these faces are, whether it is in the form of an alpha male, alpha female, a mean boss, or the power-hungry individual. We will explain the underneath motivation that causes bullying and how to take care of yourself when you are face-to-face with this kind of workplace behavior. Now, returning to our program is Katherine Crowley, a Harvard-trained psychotherapist, and Kathi Elster, a management consultant and executive coach. They are the co-authors of Mean Girls at Work, Working with You is Killing Me, and Working for You Isn't Working for Me. Their firm, K-Squared Enterprises, is dedicated to helping clients manage interpersonal relationships in the workplace. Now, we already have some folks in the chat room, and if you're listening live, you can simply go to www.blogtalkradio.com/Texas-conflict coach, and you will be able to click on and see the chat room to scroll down and be able to engage with us there. We invite your questions and comments. You can certainly call in and talk to us live at 347-324-3591 or engage with us on Twitter using my Twitter name at TXConflictCoach, or for that matter, at AskK2, which is for both Kathi and Katherine. So both of you, welcome back to the program.
Oh, thank you, Patty.
We're delighted to be here.
Well, you know, y'all are so much fun to have conversations with, and when you listen to your My Crazy Office podcast, they're just hilarious, and yet they're so full of valuable nuggets in the things that come up in our crazy workplaces. So it's a lot of fun, and we'll talk more about that later for our listeners, but I'm so glad you're back.
Thanks.
So, you know, you have a great deal of experience with coaching, teaching, and consulting around bad workplace behaviors, and it tells you that bullying is what? Blank. So fill in the blank. Bullying is blank.
Well, you know, bullying is used a lot, but we believe that it's when somebody really imposes fear or intimidation on another person.
And that fear and intimidation the purpose of it is to try to control their behavior.
Mm-hmm. And it
so
comes out.
Okay, or control. But is this intentional? Let me just clarify. Do they know that they're doing that? Is that why they're doing it?
Great question. No, not necessarily. We have many clients that have to be told, and they are confused sometimes when they hear that. They thought that they were not being that way. Or they felt angry in the moment, got it out, and said, no, I just got it out and I'm fine now. So, no, many times it's not obvious to them.
Okay. All right. So so right now, just so we can set the tone here, usually bullying is someone who's behaving in a way, and we're going to look at these behaviors that imposes fear and intimidation on another person or persons, and as a way to take control, and they don't always realize that they're doing it with that purpose in mind. So what are we looking at? What might be the seeing or hearing that says this is actually occurring?
Well, I think the person who puts another person down in front of others, but does it not in a funny way, but in a mean way,
mm-hmm.
Or somebody that corners you as you're walking down the hallway and, gets 2 inches away from your face and puts you down, those are pretty intimidating activities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and bullying can be overt in the person who's just loud and dominating and tells you don't know what you're talking about, or this is horrible work, or what do you think you're doing here. It can be very kind of extreme in that way, but it also can be very covert. Bullying could take the form of a look, or whispering. Two women perhaps whispering while you walk by. That might feel very intimidating. It could be a nonverbal aggressive gesture or facial expression. Yeah. And it could also involve bad-mouthing behind your back, where you don't hear about it, but you get the notion, this person is talking trash about you, as they say. But you don't get it directly, but you have this sense that they are trying to soil your reputation and make you feel bad indirectly.
Yeah, I mean, just to build on what Katherine was saying, I think there's a physical, you can give off intimidation physically with a dirty look, just with the way you move towards a person or turn your back on the person, and it can be very intimidating.
So let me clarify something because, as a practitioner myself, and I've heard this in many of my mediations or even coaching practice where someone will say, he gave me that look.
Right.
He's bullying me.
Right.
and the person who's hearing this says, what do you mean? What look? I'm not giving you any look. What look are you talking about? So is that one look the bullying behavior, or is it just, so I'm sensing that bullying might be something more long-term than just the look.
Right. That's probably one in a series of things, but I think what Kathi said, and I'm sure, Patty, what you've experienced, which is very true, is that there's an energetic power play going on that the recipient feels. So whether the bully is conscious of the message that he or she is sending or whether they're just doing it, the person on the other end feels it.
Okay.
When we were doing our research to write Mean Girls at Work, we were really, very taken by how many women felt nonverbal communication from other women, and it was hostile. And they described it that way. So, we can't underestimate that there are looks that say a lot. There's a big communication behind your look.
Absolutely. I mean, and like you said, it demonstrates, and what you're basically both saying is that it's both overt, so it's very much seen, the physical body language, the look, and then of course the behind the scenes, the things that seem, as you said, covert, that doesn't seem as obvious, but can be done whether that's behind your back. There's a lot of ways that people humiliate other people. It could be in emails or in writing, so there's so many different ways that people feel threatened. And the thing about it is no one should feel intimidated, threatened, or afraid in their job, whether it's real or not, it's perceived, right? So what are the various ways or relationships? Because one of the things we're talking about here is the faces of bullying. So what are the various ways or relationships in which bullying or harassment shows up in the workplace or the business arena?
Well, I'll jump in and just there's the classic, right, the alpha male or the alpha female who just commands attention, demands respect, but also demands that you basically hop when they say jump, that kind of thing. And then there may be actually a less obvious bully. This could be someone who you have the sense has the boss's ear. It's a workplace favorite. It may be someone who's not a VP or an assistant to someone in a high position, and you get the sense that they are not going to help you in any way unless you basically kowtow to them or comply with everything they ask of you. Then you could have the well-connected bully. This is the one who's, you have a sense is very politically savvy and knows everyone and is very good at managing up, very good at forming relationships with everyone in power on the higher levels. But when they're dealing with anyone in the lower levels, tends to be dismissive and intimidating and oppressive and not in any way collegial.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's really anyone who is perceived to have some sort of power. But I also want to add another one, if I can, Patty, and that's the person who has the chip on their shoulder. You know, a person who comes into work and they seem okay at first, and over time the chip on their shoulder really starts to come out. They become resentful that they even have to come to work. We all know this kind of a person. And we've seen them hold an entire office hostage.
Yeah.
And if the person above them doesn't know how to deal with it, it goes on for quite a while.
Right.
And they're really good at playing the victim.
Oh, they're really hostile.
But their energy is such that it's intimidating. And also, actually, clients can be bullies. Clients, I mean, a client can really hold an entire department hostage. And this is especially true when they're very demanding, when they find fault with everything you do, when they refuse to give you credit for anything or refuse even to acknowledge maybe changes that you proposed and they didn't want and then they didn't happen and now it's your fault. You know, it threatens to fire you, it threatens to report you to your supervisor. I mean, we're drawing a rather unattractive picture, but we know of many managers who failed. Their whole department has been held hostage by a bullying client.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting that you bring that up about the client or the vendor that the business has hired, to bring that element in, because I don't think people would necessarily think of them as potentially demonstrating bullying or harassing types of behavior. So I'm glad you brought that in as one of the potential faces of bullying. Let's talk about, so far what we've seen and heard as more people join us in the chat room is that someone who's bullying is imposing fear and intimidation, whether they know it or not. They're trying to take control. I also heard another element in this conversation was just manipulation.
Yeah.
Depending on what role they have, whether that's, someone who's in this perceived, as you said, perceived role of power, but manipulation can be a big part of those behaviors. But why do you think they do this, whether they're conscious of it or not, but what is motivating people to use these kinds of behaviors in the first place?
I'm going to let Katherine start with this. Take the therapist here.
Yes, the psychotherapist must speak now. I think there are two elements, actually. One is that of course, the irony is there's a core insecurity, and so it's one of those things where the best defense is a good offense. So rather than you finding out that there may be anything wrong with me or that I may have any vulnerability whatsoever, I will dominate you and prove to you that I'm the one in control. And then I think the other piece of it is, unfortunately, some people, we learn through mirroring, and so some people may have been victimized by a bully in their younger years, and they think that that's what it looks like to be a powerful authority figure. And so when they go to work and when they become promoted and when they get into positions where they have some modicum of authority, they behave in the same manner.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that that's a big piece of it, is that that's the example that was set for them, and that's why they don't know there's something wrong with it also. They're just repeating what has been done to them. Yeah, I see that a lot.
I like what you said, Katherine and Kathi, both about the core insecurity. One of the comments that's being made in the chat room right now is that what motivates organizations, the employer, to hire people who demonstrate these types of behaviors. Now, obviously, it doesn't come out that they're bullying in the interview and things of that nature, but usually they're very high-performing. What motivates an organization to do that, and then what motivates them to not address it when it shows up?
Well, I think in the hiring process, if these are people that are highly productive, and have excellent results in their previous positions, they're very desirable. And they think, oh, that won't come up. You know, I think what we do is we hide our head in the sand, you know, when we're interviewing. If we want one thing, we think the other won't be a problem.
Right.
So I think there is an estimation of it if it's a high performer. And unfortunately, a lot of bullies are high performers. What they do is they manage up extremely well. They're charming to those above them, but they bully below. They don't bully up, they bully down. So that's how they get there. What was the second part? There was a second part.
Why do they turn a blind eye, basically, once the bully starts bullying? Why do the employers?
I mean, what we see is they just do not know how to handle it. They're
right. I think they fear it.
Yeah.
Sorry. I think they fear very often the leader loves the dynamism and the charisma, the charm and the capabilities of the bully, and then they actually fear the anger, and they also fear the loss of that person. They start to think that the sales will go down, whatever the department wants will sink. They fear that if they let this person go or actually confront the individual, that the company will be damaged in the negative.
You know, what's so interesting, Patty, is in this country, we really we look at people based on their results rather than on their behavior. But the truth is, we live so much with their behavior. but they got the sale, you know, and so there's a much bigger issue of emotional intelligence that's missing.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you know, what's interesting about the core words that we keep hearing here and talking about is fear and intimidation. You have the person who's using bullying behaviors unbeknownst to them, or sometimes they're very consciously using them. It's fear and intimidation. The person on the receiving end is fearful and intimidated about how to respond to the situation. HR in the organization is scared about what would they do if they were to approach the situation, especially someone in a very high leadership position who's performing at a very, very high level, and they're technically can be very brilliant. So there's a lot of fear going on, a lot of intimidation on very different sides. The thing about it is that it does get scarier and it does get uglier, especially if it goes on for years. And it seems like, I don't know, it seems like the trend for me and what I'm seeing in a lot of the workplaces in the United States, but other countries as well, is organizations are finally saying we can no longer deal with these kind of behaviors at this high cost, even though they seem to be very high-performing, technically, you know, brilliant leaders, but emotionally not intelligent.
Right.
Yeah, which is a wonderful development.
It is.
Yes. So this is a very big topic, as you mentioned. I mean, this is not a black and white topic. We could probably talk for hours. There's a lot of research, and that's why we're doing a whole series on this. Before we go into the next set of questions, were there other motivations about why people, we already talked about kind of the core insecurity. Is there anything else that you want to share about what might motivate someone to display these behaviors?
Well, I think what's important to remember is that whatever their motivation is, it's based in their psychological makeup. And you, the victim of their bullying, it's not about you. Yeah. And we forget that most of the time. We think, what's wrong with me? I mean, this is how we fall victim to it, because we believe it.
Right. I would say they also...
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that I think that one of the things, Patty, that's tough if you're on the receiving end is that bullies have a great they don't take responsibility for their behavior often. They're very good at making other people the problem. And so those individuals who are the most responsible and the most responsive and the most sensitive are often the worst targets for bullying. Because when a bully attacks you and says, what the hell is this, you don't know what you're doing, you've screwed up again, or whatever the message is, those individuals take that to heart and have the hard time doing exactly what Kathy is saying, which is to say, you are sick and suffering. This is not my problem.
It's not about me. And that's hard for a lot of people to separate because they feel the personal attack, they feel the threat, they're afraid, and they're trying to protect themselves. And so we're going to talk about if this is not about me, if this is not about us, what do you do if you find yourself in this kind of situation? So before we go there, for those of you who are tuned in, you are listening to the Texas Conflict Coach Blog Talk radio program, and I'm speaking to best-selling authors Katherine Crowley and Kathi Elster. With authors of Mean Girls at Work and My Crazy Office podcast. So let's go back to this. If it's not really about me or us, meaning I'm the target, the receiving end, what would I do if I found myself in this situation? What would you tell listeners?
Well, there's a couple of very specific things. One is you do have to create some sort of a way of taking care of yourself, which I'm going to get more into. But the second thing, which is really critical, is documentation. It's really important that you create a file, send all those emails to your home where you have those intimidating emails. If you can take a photo or you can record any kind of conversations or any voicemails that are left, gathering your witnesses, documentation, actually having proof, because so many people get into these situations and no one else heard it. No, there were no other witnesses, and no one believes them because, again, we know this is a charming person who manages up well. So documentation is really critical. Katherine, you want to talk to the self-care, or should I?
Sure. Well, in terms of the self-care, and that'll be part of the homework we're going to give the listeners, but you need to, the big thing is to purge those toxins, because when you take in the negative energy, the anger, the manipulation of someone who's bullying, it can make you sick, and it also can immobilize you. It can also depress you. So we really encourage some version of exercise, of physical movement. It could be yoga, it can be walking, it can be playing with your kids, it can be going out and smelling beautiful things of nature. It's springtime now, but it's something that physically allows you to cleanse your energy in some way and release whatever it is you've absorbed in the course of the day.
Okay, and like you said, we're going to go into a specific call to action around that. So taking care of yourself, documenting, I think that, making sure, and Kathi, you made a mention that a lot of times people will say, well, he or she is bullying me, or they're not treating me right, or they're harassing me, and then when they ask for, well, what are they doing? Well, they're giving me that look, or they embarrassed me in front of a coworker, and then it becomes a he said, she said kind of situation. And what you're saying is have that proof so that they can see the pattern over time of what's happening. What other things do you have for folks?
Well, we would like you to go to somebody in authority, but unfortunately in many companies there isn't somebody who you can go to. If you're a complainer about a high-performing person, or if you're a complainer, nobody wants to hear it. So you have to know your company. If you do know a safe person who is in a position of authority, they must be in authority, then go directly towards them. But again, they're going to want the proof. So if you cannot go to anyone in your company, seek professional help. I know many of my clients, if they come to me as an executive coach, I can help them prepare all of this, but sometimes I send them to an attorney. It really depends on the situation. But there's plenty of professionals out there, career experts, executive coaches, that will help you through this process.
So when you say seek professional help, it could be, depending on the situation, could be an attorney, could be an executive coach, could be a therapist.
Yes.
Are there other examples of professional help when you talk about that?
Actually, many people end up in the doctor's office, believe it or not, because they have a stress condition based on what's happening at work. They have eczema, they have headaches, all different kinds of issues. Some people get ulcers from what's going on at work. And then that doctor usually sends you to either a therapist or an executive coach or a career counselor. I think that's primarily who can help you with this.
Yeah,
it's
if you're visiting your church, you could go, or your temple, your synagogue, you could go to a spiritual guide as well.
Oh,
if
sure.
someone like that helps you.
It's kind of sad that we really, at least in the United States, and I would not say that that's true of other countries such as Australia, for example, who already have laws in place for workplace bullying harassment. The United States does not. And it's sad that we cannot go to someone that we trust in authority, such as an HR person. Yeah. Maybe it is an ombuds. You would hope maybe an ombuds, but it's sad when a company's system, a company's culture, as you said, doesn't even support, an employee bringing up a serious issue like that. And I hope it gets to a point where, organizations, businesses, leaders, HR, labor relations, all those folks who are in positions of authority start to take this very seriously and see what damage it's really creating. And it's really sad that we're not even at that point that people can feel that they can do that without them feeling that they are the victim of the situation.
Yeah, I've seen
or
it
the
backfire.
complainer.
I've seen it backfire where they may go to the bully and, try to intervene and do some kind of a, mediation, and that really backfires. The bully will act fine in the mediation but then attack again later. So you really have to be very, very careful.
Well, and it's interesting that you bring up the mediation, because certainly in the field of dispute resolution, there's been a lot of controversy about we know in the family field of mediation, they say you never mediate domestic violence cases, and because of the power imbalances and all the issues that come up with that, and there's a lot of conversation about these types. But what's interesting is that in several mediations that I've done where workplace bullying wasn't the word of the day, but now you're seeing it, come into the conversations, the actual term workplace bullying. But what's interesting is that the parties will get in and both people who are upset with each other will accuse each other of bullying the other or using bullying behavior, so that they both feel like victims of the other's bullying behaviors. And so you're like, well, who do you believe? Who's bullying who? So it's a very interesting, very, very interesting dynamic.
But actually, I think that brings up such an important point, Patty, which is I think that what a bully is missing is a range of capabilities for settling differences, for creating compromise, for navigating difficult situations, And so in a way, it's like all they have to work with is a hammer. And I'll hammer you until you relent, And so I think that statement that each one thinks they're being bullied by the other is also telling you that neither party has the skills to communicate or work out their differences using other tools.
That's often the case in that situation. Now, let's look at this from a different angle. Let's say that someone who is listening to this program begins to self-identify and recognize, am I using these same behaviors that they're talking about? What would you recommend to them if they were hearing this and saying, man, maybe I'm someone who's using those types of behaviors?
Well, I hope people are waking up and hearing that. And I think we all have the ability to misuse our power. I don't think it's just special people that can bully. I think we're all capable of it, given the right set of circumstances and given power. And I think the thing you want to ask yourself, and this is sort of self-therapy, so Katherine could probably address more, but identify what's underneath it for you.
Yeah.
What is making you do that?
Yes, and actually specifically, what's the fear, really, that's driving that behavior? What makes it that the only way you think you can get your way is to intimidate, manipulate, instill fear in others?
And I think that if people are listening and they're saying, and let's say that they're the person being accused or fingers being pointed, that they're the ones demonstrating that. I mean, I can hear people say, I don't do that. And so part of it is opening your mind to hearing what is the feedback that you're hearing, whether they're your peers, your direct reports, maybe it's even your own boss that's saying this to you. What are they saying to you, and is there a pattern that is really duplicative? So if they're saying, look, you're intimidating the employees, they're afraid of you, listen to that feedback and be open to hearing what am I doing or saying, and like you said, what's underneath that, what is motivating me to use those behaviors, when I'm engaging with these people. So part of it is, being open to hearing and relinquishing that resistance to defend yourself.
And actually, I can give a very concrete example, Patty. We are working right now. There's a woman in an organization. She's extremely capable, very competent, and totally results-oriented. She just wants people to do the things she wants them to do to get the results that she wants to get. So it goes back to what Kathi was saying about results orientation. She has no idea how much she alienates people. But by just saying things like, well, why don't you just do your job,
Right.
In her mind, she thinks she's just stating the obvious. But for that person on the receiving end, that is offensive, it is bullying, and it is a tactic that will do the opposite of what the individual who's saying it wants to see happen.
Yes. I imagine that people, there's a real spectrum of opinion on workplace bullying, from the people who say, how could they possibly be, lacking self-awareness and not have insight into what they're saying and what they're doing and how it's impacting others. And the truth is that a lot of them are really, truly surprised when it's brought to their attention. And then you have the other spectrum, well, they're all evil, ban them to the islands, never to be seen again. But they're human, and the thing about it is that we can change.
Yeah.
Yes. Go, Kathi.
I think we all have to recognize this part in ourselves. Even those that say, I don't do that. I would really challenge that. I think if you're in the workplace, which is competitive, these behaviors are going to come out to some extent to somebody who you feel you can bully or push around or get your way with. And I think we all have to take a look at that. Right? There's many sides to all of us. And I think it's our responsibility to look at that about ourselves and own it. We're all human.
Oh, absolutely. So at this point, as we start to wrap down the program for today, what we're really talking about is a number of different things. What are these faces? What are these people's faces that are bullying? And we talked about it could be male, it could be female, it could be the person who's the secretary with a lot of perceived power. It's not always someone in a position of top leadership, for example, as you mentioned. It could even be the client or the vendor to the business or organization, which is a very interesting face right there. We've talked about what might be motivating some of these intimidating fears, the possibility of wanting to take control or to manipulate a situation. And a lot of that times that goes down to the core insecurity that they're feeling, or the feeling of being incompetent, and they don't want to feel incompetent. Or like you said, Kathi, maybe they themselves experience this in their younger years. But the key message that you were also saying is, if you're the target, if you're on the receiving end of these bullying type of behaviors, it's really not about you. It's really about them. And so we obviously talked about taking care of yourself and documenting, and if you can, go to someone that you trust who is an authority in the organization if the organization supports such a culture dealing with these issues. So we've talked about a number of these things, and so the call to action, which we usually do, or an assignment for the week, what do you want listeners to take as far as the next step?
Well, I'll say the short version, and then Kathi can give some examples. But there are three ingredients, three things we'd like you to do. If you find that you are someone who is in a bullying situation, that is, that you feel that you are experiencing bullying from another person, we want you to restore your energy, rebuild your confidence, and repair your mental state. And Kathi, perhaps you can give examples of each of those.
Well, in order to restore your energy, to us the best cure for that is some form of exercise. So when you're going through something like this, it's important to just, walk a lot, go to the gym, play tennis, do something that helps you restore your energy. It's very, very draining. In terms of repairing your confidence, if you cannot do well at your office right now because you just don't feel like you can achieve there, you may want to do something in your church or something in your community where you can achieve, and that will help you in rebuilding your confidence. And in terms of repairing your mental state, the exercise helps a lot, but it's always a good idea to seek some sort of professional help to speak with. So the whole idea here is to really take care of yourself. This is our self-care program.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's extremely important, as you mentioned earlier, there's a tendency for people to want to isolate when they find themselves in a situation. Mm-hmm. So making sure that you reach out, like you said, repairing that mental state, reaching out for that professional help, whatever that is, and there's many different people, we mentioned that before, but all of these extreme self-care is so, so important so that you're not isolating yourself. Okay. Anything else that you want to add about that, Katherine?
Yes, the thing, I think that is so important with each of these is to appreciate that it is not easy to be in the position of being bullied, and part of why we emphasize so much these things about purging the energy, rebuilding your confidence, and repairing is that you need to build back. Bullies take a lot out of us. So you need to, it's almost like rebuilding the foundation. You need to build back that foundation with compassion for what you're going through and appreciate that once you do get your power back, you won't be victimized by this person's behavior going forward.
And that really takes some practice, doesn't it?
Yeah. It does.
Absolutely. So before we do the final message, there's a number of ways that people can find you. I know that on Facebook you have Mean Girls at Work, which is the book, and they can engage with you there, I believe, as I understood. Is that right? Is that the Facebook page, Mean Girls at Work?
And K-Squared, we also have our company page.
Okay, K-Squared. Okay, great. And then you also have ksquaredenterprises.com. And again, all of this information is on the program page at texasconflictcoach.com. And I would highly encourage you to subscribe to their iTunes podcast called My Crazy Office, and it's crazy funny with great nuggets of information. So, and they're all free podcasts. And I think you do something every week. Is that right?
We do, and we have professional comedians on.
I know. It's awesome.
They make us funnier.
Now, you also have a mailing list. Is that right? Is that for a newsletter or?
Well, we send out alerts to all of our podcasts and anything else that we have going on. Sometimes we give lectures, and we've got a new book coming out, so we just send all our announcements through our mailing list. But it's always good to go to our website, ksquaredenterprises.com, because there's loads of free stuff on it.
Yes, there is. And did I hear you say another book is coming out?
No.
Okay. I'll be staying tuned.
No, not yet.
For sure. Well, Katherine and Kathi, what final message do you want to leave with listeners?
Kathi?
Oh, you want me to go first?
Sure.
It's my big message actually for the last couple of years has been to just not take other people's behavior personally. That whatever they're doing is about them. And to stay strong in yourself and just look at people like you're watching a movie. Don't take it personally.
Like that. And mine is, will sound a little less sophisticated, but I think it's important, which is often when we're talking about bullying, things happen, behaviors, someone else does something, and you don't know why, but you start to ruminate about it, obsess about it, worry about it. And so what I would say is if you start feeling crazy, you are probably in crazy. And that's part of why it's so important to bring other people into the picture, to give you a reality check, to give you consolation, and to give you some ideas of how to address the situation.
Okay, love it. Very, very good. Thank you both, Kathi and Katherine, for joining us back again on the Texas Conflict Coach. I really love your work, your books, your podcast, and I really appreciate the value that you've given to our listeners and kicking off our series on workplace bullying and harassment. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the work you do.
Yes, Patty.
All right, everyone. Y'all have a good night, and stay tuned for the rest of the April series on workplace bullying and harassment.
Thank you for listening to the Texas Conflict Coach. We hope you've enjoyed the program. You can find over 300 podcasts archived to listen at your own convenience at texasconflictcoach.com or download the podcast at iTunes or Stitcher Radio. To learn about upcoming radio programs and resources, sign up for our monthly e-newsletter.